Hey, what's up guys, TechTine here and I am back again with a brand new video. So before I begin, I just want to take a second and thank you all so much for the incredible support lately. It really means a lot more than you think. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, make sure you subscribe and check out more of my videos. A lot of great content is coming really soon. So basically subscribe, turn that notification bell on, and yeah, let's get moving. So in today's video, we're going to be comparing the cameras of the Google Pixel 6a as well as the Galaxy A54 5G. So this has been requested by quite some people. And the results of this camera review were kind of expected, but at the same time, there were some shocking results. So I'm going to break down this kind of camera comparison into the following categories. We're going to be talking about the camera designs, the camera specs, the camera interfaces, picture quality, as well as video quality, which is kind of important in today's world. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. And the first things first is the design of the camera sensors, and starting with the Google Pixel 6a. So basically Google's design has been familiar for quite some time now, and the way that they decided to do it is just by having this kind of strip go all the way around from one side to the other, and the camera lens is kind of hidden there, so you have a dual sensor on the back as well as your LED flash. So when you set the phone on a flat surface, it kind of sits awkwardly, but it doesn't rock really back and forth as much as the A54 5G. Now, as far as your camera specs, you have a dual sensor on the back, a main sensor of 12.2 megapixels, as well as a ultra wide at 12 megapixels. Now, you also can record 4K video at up to 30 or 60 frames per second, 1080p video at 30, 60, 120, and 240 super slow-mo video. You have gyro electronic image stabilization for video and optical image stabilization as well. And you have your optical image stabilization for pictures as well. You have your dual LED flash, pixel shift, auto HDR, panorama, and just a lot of features that Google crammed into the sensor of this phone and its image processing, which is really where this phone shines. And like I said, as far as this kind of back strip, it kind of blends well, but imagine if it was just a flat surface. Man, that would be crazy. But the glass on it does curve a little bit, so it gives it kind of a decent look. It doesn't look that bad. It looks different than other phones. That's what I'll tell you. As far as your front-facing camera, you do have an 8 megapixel sensor that is at f2.0 aperture, and it does record 1080p at 30 frames per second. Now, as far as the camera interface, to me, Google right now makes one of the best camera interfaces of all time, because pretty much everything that you do on this camera gives you, not everything, but for the most part, you get some sort of haptic feedback when you take pictures, when you're transitioning between your ultra wide and your standard lens. And even it does have this kind of 2x, which is digital zoom, but thanks to Google's image processing, it does look really decent. But more on that later when we look at pictures side by side. And yeah, that's basically the nutshell of the camera experience on the Google Pixel 6a. Now let's transition to the Galaxy A54 5G. Now the camera design is standard Samsung, so you would expect it in pretty much all of Samsung's latest and greatest phones. It has the triple camera setup on here, and as far as your sensors go, you have a 50 megapixel main sensor. You also have a 12 megapixel ultra wide as well as a 5 megapixel macro sensor. You can record video at 4K 30 frames per second, 1080p 30 or 60 frames per second, or if you want super slow-mo, you'll have to transition to 720p at 480 frames per second. So the only thing that's protecting this camera lens is the camera lens cover. Other than that, it does have these rings around it, which gives it an okay look. Now, if you set the phone on a flat surface, best believe it's going to rock back and forth and it's not going to be a fun experience. You may even scratch your lens cover, so make sure you keep that in mind. And a case is highly recommended on both of these phones to begin with. So yeah, as far as your front-facing camera, it has kind of a 32 megapixel front-facing camera, so a higher resolution. And you can actually record up to 4K video on the front-facing camera at 30 frames per second or 1080p at 30 or 60 frames. And as for the camera interface itself, it does have a lot of options. It gives you a lot of flexibility. But as far as an experience overall, I think the much simpler approach that Google took is slightly better. But that needless to say, both phones take pictures really quick and process pictures really, really fast. So now let's switch the topic of conversation and actually talk about image quality. So this is where things can get a little tricky and a little interesting. Alright, beginning with the first picture here. So side by side, first of all, let me know in the comments which one you would prefer. But to me, if you look at the Galaxy A54, you can tell that it's slightly overexposed. It is also slightly oversaturated, but that's typical with Samsung. That's what they like to do. And the Google Pixel 6a, on the other hand, has more of a yellowish tint to it, a warmer tone, if you would will. And the A54 has a kind of a cooler tone. Now, my preference in this scenario would be the Google Pixel 6a. And it's not just because it did a much better job, but to me it just looks a little bit more pleasing. Some people might actually pick the A54 over the Pixel 6a in this scenario. Now in the next picture, I do have to pick the Pixel 6a right off the top, and I'll tell you why. So basically, the Pixel 6a gives you more balanced shot overall than the Galaxy A54. If you notice that the Galaxy A54, it is also overexposed, which is a common problem, but it's not as saturated as previous pictures, whereas the Pixel 6a kind of tries its best to make it slightly vibrant, but at the same time balancing the overall image. Also pay attention to the sky itself. You'll see that the blue is more prominent on the Pixel 6a than the A54. So this next image here tests out the dynamic range, and this is kind of a shocker. So the Galaxy A54 has a much more intake and a much better color representation of the dynamic range than the Pixel 6a, at least as far as my preference. Yeah, it's slightly more saturated, but to the naked eye it actually looks better. And similar story with the wide angle. Now both wide angle do get a loss on quality. It's more prominent on the A54, but the Pixel 6a's dynamic range is slightly worse than the A54 as far as preference goes. And so in these scenarios, I do prefer the A54 slightly. Now, as far as the color representation in this picture in particular, the A54 also does a better job in making the picture pop a little bit more. It's kind of toned down on the Google Pixel 6a, which makes me prefer the A54 slightly better at this time as well than the Google Pixel 6a. Now when it comes to the bokeh effect, the Google Pixel 6a has the A54 beat by a mile in my opinion. So much better bokeh effect and a much better color representation in the background itself. As well as the shadows in this next picture, you can tell that the Google Pixel 6a does a better job in accommodating sunlight than the Galaxy A54. So yeah, it's kind of a back and forth affair. And in indoor conditions, the Google Pixel 6a, in my opinion, wins by also a long shot. The picture is much better represented, whether you're in the standard lens or even the wide angle. And in this next scenario here, you'll be able to kind of tell a much better representation of color on the Google Pixel 6a in more of an artificial light environment. Even if you zoom in, you can tell that the colors and the resolution may slightly be higher on the A54, but still looks really good on the Google Pixel 6a. So as far as video capability and the way that both of these phones process video quality, we're going to take a look at them side by side, but basically let's start and talk a little bit about the Galaxy A54. So the A54 5G maxes out at 4K at 30 frames per second, but you cannot use electronic image stabilization to stabilize video on the A54 when you're at 4K. You can, however, use it at 1080p, which is thumbs up, so you don't have to record at 4K at all time if you need some sort of stabilization in your life. And in general, overall, it does do a decent job as far as video capability, and you can get out of it what you need if you're trying to use it for social media and things of that nature. But here's the kicker. When it comes to the actual video capability, the Google Pixel 6a is slightly better. Like I said, we're going to take a look at them side by side. But basically, the image stabilization does a much better job in my opinion. And even the color representation does look slightly better. And you can record at up to 4K 60 or 30 frames per second and you still get some sort of stabilization on there. Both optical and electronic image stabilization, and the bokeh is slightly better. Colors are represented better, but that's thanks to Google's image processing, which is really good. It keeps up with flagships if you want to keep track of that. Now let's take a look at them side by side, and actually then you'll be able to tell which is better. So here they are side by side, and what I can tell you, like I said, is the color representation on the Google Pixel 6a is just much better. And that's thanks to this image processing, like I said, and even when it comes to the bokeh effect and the close-up subjects, the Pixel 6a has the A54 beat. But if you think about it, it's not by a drastic shot. I think with a little bit of editing and color grading, you can make the A54 not as good, but as close as possible. So yeah, if you put some work in, you can go with the A54. Now overall, if I want to end it on a conclusion, the winner can seem pretty clear, but not really. So to me personally, I would prefer the Google Pixel 6a's camera over the A54. And at the end of the day, a camera is not just what makes a good phone. However, the Google Pixel 6a, since both of these phones are at a competitive price point at this point, both of them are really comparable, but the Pixel 6a does produce, in my opinion, slightly better images overall in all scenarios. There are some scenarios where the A54 has the Google Pixel 6a beat as far as preference, but getting too technical is just not going to help you pick which camera is right for you. So look at the pictures that I posted here and listen to what I said and go back and rewind the video, do it again and again, and you tell me which one you would prefer, because you're the one who's going to buy the phone at the end of the day, not me. I told you what I would prefer and I told you which one I would go with. But yeah, you tell me. Which one do you like more? Which one do you think is more of a complete package, the Pixel 6a or the A54? And with that being said, if you guys want to see a full comparison, an actual phone comparison between these two phones, then let me know in the description. I'll make it happen. I mean, why not? So yeah, thank you all so much for watching. I appreciate all my supporters, and I will catch you guys in the next one. Thank you all so much for watching.